For me, one of the most memorable and striking elements of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion's world were the countless elegant, stark white ruins scattered across its landscape. Built by the ancient Ayleid elves, you were never far from one of these structures, from the deepest and murkiest swamps of southern Blackwood, all the way to the sun-parched hills of the Mediterranean Gold Coast. They populated the entire province of Cyrodiil. I think the fact that they are likely the first thing the player's attention will be drawn to upon leaving the introductory area of the Imperial sewers and getting their first look at the province is telling. Alongside this short wooden pier and the imposing Valus Mountains in the distance, they take up almost around a third of the player's screen in this first shot of the outside world, immediately communicating their importance to this land's history. So, their presence in this world tells us the Ayleid civilization once existed. No, thrived even. But how do they go about doing this? And what else do they tell us about this archaic empire and its history? In today's video, through playing a role, I will take you on a journey through some of these very ruins to attempt to answer these questions. I will become an avid archaeologist who exists in this world in universe. I will lack the omniscient database of knowledge and lore regarding this race that is provided by the Elder Scrolls Wiki, and so the full extent of information must be deduced entirely through what the game can communicate to me using environmental storytelling alone. To tell the truth, this persona isn't entirely unlike my actual knowledge on the lore of the Ayleids in real life either. I played a lot of Oblivion as a kid. It was actually my first Elder Scrolls game, but I seem to remember spending the vast majority of my time with it just aimlessly wandering the landscapes of Cyrodiil. I think this was because I was so captivated by the incredible atmosphere created through a combination of the gorgeous art style, level design and music, but that's getting off topic. What I'm trying to say is that I never actually spent a huge amount of time within the Ayleid ruins, nor were they a topic within the lore that I was the most interested in reading up on. I guess 11-year-old me just got distracted by the cool dragons in Skyrim. Today, through the lens of this character and universe, that changes. After my investigation has concluded, I also want to consult the broad strokes of what's known about this people from the established canon, whilst maybe going a little bit deeper where relevant, and see how much about the Ayleids I got right. It is also worth noting that, even as this character, there will be basic, foundational facts about these peoples that I'm aware of, things like how they enslaved and subjugated many of the human peoples for quite some time, but that's about the extent of it. The idea is that I possess the knowledge an average Cyrodiilian growing up in this world would possess through common education. So, let's not waste any more time and investigate the archaeology of the Ayleids. I began my investigation with an exploration of Vilverin, the Ayleid ruin immediately in front of you as you exit the Imperial City's sewers. It just seemed fitting, really. Something I immediately noticed, which will become a trend going forward, is the repeat occupation of these structures by peoples or entities that are non-indigenous to them. In this instance, it took the form of a couple of bandits having set up shop just outside the structure's entrance. Nothing I couldn't handle, of course. Obviously, I'm hardly expecting to encounter a living Ayleid in the flesh. It's common knowledge that they've been extinct for hundreds of years after all, but to see them, or at least their heritage, continue to exist in a sense, or be relevant, is interesting. You can almost make a case for the Ayleid ruins acting as a site-based palimpsest in this way. Another thing of note that caught my attention before entering the interior of the ruin was the shimmering field of green light emanating from some kind of well structure. Upon interacting with it, my restoration skill increased. Neat. It goes without saying, and I don't think this is too much of a surprise in the first place, but this shows the Ayleids were capable magicka users. One last thing before I enter. I wish to discuss the overall architectural style and aesthetic of these ruins across the board, because there doesn't exist a great deal of disparity between various sites. Whether they be as far north as the Gerald Mountains, or as far south as the swamps of Blackwood, they appear to be made of a brilliant, almost piercing white marble. Within almost every site, The material has done well to remain as relatively pristine as it is, considering the age of these structures and their aforementioned lack of upkeep. Any potential unique preservative effects too, such as desiccation or freezing, cannot have played a part in protecting these structures. I mean, we're not exactly in an environment here that's dry or cold enough to allow for such preservation. It's Central Cyrodiil, not Hammerfell or Skyrim. The likeliest solution, then, is either that the material used to construct the ruins is exceptionally robust, or that some form of magicka has been applied to it to make it last longer, as we are seeing, something we now know to be within the realms of possibility due to the discovery of the well. Next, in terms of the general style of the structures, it has to be said that, despite the atrocities said to have occurred within them, they are rather beautiful. There's a real elegance and refinement in their complex, but not overly intricate construction, in the gently angled arches and subtly corrugated style pillars that fall somewhere in between form and function. To be able to claim ownership of such a unique and attractive style, and on such a massive scale, is a marvel that shouldn't go unappreciated. The Ayleids may have been a people capable of great evil, a fact that will be strongly reinforced through some of my later discoveries, but that doesn't mean they weren't capable of making beautiful things, as seen here and all over these structures. Let's go inside and see if that beauty continues. Within the structure, I uncovered several things of note. First, it became evident that the bandit occupation continued inside, even within the deepest and darkest reaches of these ancient labyrinths. Nuisance they may be, but you can't fault their bravery. On the topic of bandits, though, a question arises in the confrontation I made with multiple skeletons within Vilverin. Are these merely the reanimated innards of the pesky intruders, or a much more exciting possibility, of the ancient Ayleid elves themselves? The skeletal anatomy on display suggests not, looking much more in line with what is known concerning the proportions and builds of man and mer alive today, but who can say just how much their appearance differed? It's certainly worth at least considering. Another key discovery was a significant piece of material culture for the Ayleids. Among the many artifacts of varied origin within the ruins, I came across Welkin stone scattered around the place. Just like the well outside, these act as another prominent instance of the Ayleids' strong affiliation with magicka. They, just like the well, restored mine, after all. It certainly helped with, dispatching some of Vilverin's housekeepers. Thanks, Ayleids. Maybe you're not so bad after all. I would soon come to absolutely devour these words. Another article of Ayleid material culture soon came to reveal itself through the unique designs featured on many of the ruins' doors, that being of some kind of glowing tree. The iconography is interesting, and suggests some connection between the Ayleids and the natural world or environment. Moreover, the somewhat root-like aesthetic can also be found on other types of doors throughout Vilverin. It's not exclusive to these kinds. Interesting. It's a long shot, but to me personally, the kind of tree being depicted more resembles some kind of jungle sapling, a tall canopy with many intertwining branches, than the more temperate tree species that today populate much of the Imperial Province, especially the Heartlands, where Vilverin itself is located. Could this possibly serve as a reference to the very different Cyrodiil the Ayleids would have inhabited in their time, all those centuries ago? One spoken about in ancient texts, one where the land was an endless, overgrown jungle lush with vegetation, before the dragon break initiated by Tiber Septim that changed the land's very form. Or perhaps the design suggests trees or nature in some way are important to the Ayleid creation myth or evolutionary history. It's a mystery I look forward to investigating further later, when I can cross-reference my findings with arguments made by scholars. But the enjoyment I received from such inquiries soon found itself interrupted by the menagerie of traps that repeatedly barred my way, threatening to turn me into yet another warning not to delve deeper. Did I listen? What do you think? The nature of these traps, though, was interesting. Most seemed pretty clearly to have their origin in modern times, through the bandit occupation, being made largely from perishable materials such as wood, which surely would have rotted in the millennia past. Moreover, their typological style is a clear departure from the pristine, marbled aesthetic the Ayleid people seem to have otherwise favoured. This cannot be said, however, for some of the other kinds of traps I came across deeper within Vilverin. These, such as this ghastly spike floor, are clearly native to the structure's original construction, due to their consistency with the rest of its aesthetic, and as such have very interesting ramifications. Were they perhaps made to keep people out of the ruins, or, more alarmingly, inside of them? The latter would certainly be consistent with the mainstream narrative regarding these reportedly barbaric peoples and their deeds, and at the time acted as an uncomfortably stark reminder of where I currently found myself. Still, I willed myself to push onwards, using a sort of morbid appreciation of the complexity and sophistication of the various mechanisms at play to take my mind off of the pondering of what use they could have seen. These people were not quite on the level of the Dwemer in terms of technological advancement, but they still clearly had a rather adept and not unimpressive understanding of the mechanical sciences. They weren't solely magically developed then. The most noteworthy find during my investigation of Vilverin, though, came near its conclusion, an expansive room enclosing a series of buttons that, when pressed, opened a corresponding series of stone doors, hiding small chambers behind. Within these were more of the same skeletons I came across earlier, putting up an admittedly decent fight. When these twice-deceased denizens had been dealt with, I let my mind wander to explore the implications of this space. My stomach turned once as I realised its likeness to a prison, and twice as I realised how consistent this was with, just like the earlier traps, the common depiction of the Ayleids, of a cruel, callous people who enslaved, and as seen in this case imprisoned, and killed and raped and tortured. I can't say I was unhappy to be out when the sunny meadows of Cyrodiil welcomed me once more just a few moments after. With the most famous Ayleid construction in the world, a constant, unwelcome companion to my travels, as the white gold tower of the Imperial City persisted its looming over me, I skirted Lake Rumer, following its shoreline to the west until I came across my next Ayleid ruin of note, Fanakesical, as you can surely tell, not quite as easy to pronounce as Vilverin had been. This particular ruin's defining feature was too obvious to miss. Standing slightly submerged in the shallows of Rumer, an enormous, intricate statue depicting... well, it was certainly depicting something. It actually took me a minute just to decipher what I was even looking at. The visage of an armour-clad human or elven figure holding what looked to be a shield and, I think, a bow? Looming over him, standing atop his shoulder, was a beautiful representation of some kind of enormous eagle. Beyond merely what this implied concerning the possible fauna of Cyrodiil at the time of the statue's construction, you would not want to be eating a sandwich with one of those things around. It also has a few interesting ramifications concerning the Ayleids themselves. Firstly, although its height and almost overly complex construction made it hard to inspect this element in any kind of thorough detail, the figure shown seems to largely be anatomically identical with your average man, or mer in this instance, I guess, today. Should the figure specifically be depicting an Ayleid, which would absolutely make the most sense, this makes the tantalizing possibility that the skeletons I had earlier fought within Vilverin were indeed the undead counterparts of this very same race all the more likely. Exciting! Never thought I'd be able to claim to have battled and bested a member of such a mythic people. As for the identity of the specific figure shown, who can say? Perhaps he was a prominent political leader to the Ayleids, a holy figure, a deity, or maybe even the creator of the structure himself, signing off his work with an elaborate and unorthodox signature. We will likely never know. I do also wonder what the bird represents though, because I doubt it would be something as mundane as a mere representation of a random Cyrodiilian bird species which existed at the time, as I jokingly suggested earlier. Perhaps these avian behemoths were in some way connected to their culture or creation myth. I'm not sure, but it's at least also another instance of the Ayleid peoples being associated with nature. Again, very interesting. The layout and positioning of Thanakesical's exterior is also rather curious. Lying on the western shore of Lake Rumer and facing the imperial city, it somewhat resembles some sort of harbour. It's open to the water, with 3 tall walls surrounding the statue and bay from every other side, almost welcoming you in from the aquatic dimension. If the water level was the same back at the time of the structure's construction, and I see no reason to believe it wouldn't be, I wonder if this particular ruin was made with a nautical purpose in mind, possibly as some kind of pier? If this is the case, maybe another role of the statue was to act as a kind of lightless lighthouse in a sense, being visible from far distances and clearly signalling to Ayleid sailors where to dock their ships. The Ayleids having water access to Lake Rumer, and consequently the Niben in this way, would certainly make a lot of sense, likely a driving force in their clear ability to spread their empire far and wide, across every corner of not just Cyrodiil, but southern Tamriel as a whole. In this way, ideas could also spread far and wide, perhaps a contributing factor in the consistent aesthetic typology pretty much every ruin across the province is built in. Neat. There admittedly wasn't much more of note to discover within the interior of this particular ruin, other than yet more irritating bandits and skeletons, although now knowing the latter were likely to be the undead forms of Ayleid themselves did make fighting them this time around much more exciting. There wasn't much else, other than another type of undead that I found myself locked in a skirmish with, a ghost. What this means, I'm not sure. While the origins of ghosts across Nirn are somewhat disputed, if it's true that they're born from spirits that died a traumatic death, and as such were unable to transcend the mortal sphere, I wonder if this poor guy could be one of the unfortunate souls that lost their lives to the Ayleid's brutality, reportedly at least. I take some comfort in the fact I helped them to move on. The next stage of my journey led me further west still, through the towering boughs and branches of the simply stunning Great Forest region. Surrounded by the serenity of nature, I couldn't help but feel optimistic about the future of this investigation. Sure, I'd made troubling discoveries earlier, but who knows? Maybe I had misjudged them. Maybe they had some other purpose than one of outright maliciousness. Maybe I would do the impossible and discover some long-buried secret that completely rewrote the public perception of the Ayleids, painting their name in the history books in far brighter hues. But I was wrong. So incredibly, stupendously wrong. Because nothing could have prepared me for what I came across in my final Ayleid ruin, Sayatata.
For it was here where I made my most horrifying discovery of all.
From an initial glance, this site's exterior didn't appear significantly hostile. In fact, nestled in the green shadow of Colovia's Great Forest, with its structures arranged in an orderly, aesthetically pleasing circular formation, it was actually rather beautiful. This extreme juxtaposition served only to make what I uncovered inside all the more shocking. Before I could enter, though, I had to do battle with a couple of conjurers and their Daedric pets. While it is true that the specific identity of Sayatata's current occupiers can't truthfully tell us much about its creators, it does expand the list of the various groups and factions known to today inhabit the Ayleid ruins. Bandits, skeletons, ghosts, and now Daedra worshippers and their minions, Daedra themselves. It's also yet another instance of one of these ruins acting as a site-based palimpsest. With yet more cultists and their Daedric brethren attempting, and failing, to bar my way inside, it became clear that the occupation continued deep within the winding, labyrinthian corridors and chambers of this subterranean sanctum. As I would reflect on later, it made sense. I'm not sure many other twisted kinds of individuals would be happily willing to call such an evil place their home. Furthermore, they'd well and truly decked the place out in elements of their native obsession. Books detailing the natures and identities of the various Daedric princes, alchemical stations for doing God knows what, and more. It made navigating the site just all the more unnerving, almost subtly psyching me up for what horrors would await me at its end. Before I could get there, though, I had to go through the first instance of a very different kind of space than any I'd come across thus far. The seemingly seamless, airtight walls, floors and ceilings of Seatar suddenly gave way to the bare rock and soil of a presumably natural cave, a brief interruption to the illusion that I wasn't currently tens of meters underground. Does this have much significance? Again, the answer is stubbornly unclear. Perhaps this section of the ruin was once too completely, well, complete, but some natural eroding or decomposing element broke apart the marble that had previously made it up, revealing the original cave beneath. Supporting this idea was the fact that there did exist a small stream in the centre of this space, with the water possibly helping to break apart the marble over untold generations, through entering its tiny, porous holes and freezing during the winter season, thus displacing and, as I said, breaking apart the material. Does any of this matter? Probably not. Perhaps I'm just purposefully delaying having to detail the final surprise Seatar had in store for me, but I do think it's interesting nonetheless, possibly indicating that the seemingly strangely semi-indestructible marble-like material making up these structures can actually be damaged. Or maybe the Ayleids just got tired and couldn't be asked to finish this particular section. We will simply never know. Within this enormous chamber I found myself in immediately after, the most disturbing discovery yet, the one I just won't stop talking about, and you'll soon understand why, trust me, was awaiting me. After dealing with the familiar conjurers and scamps, I explored the space's perimeter and stumbled upon this contraption. At first, I wasn't even sure what it was. Some kind of archaic, Ayleid air conditioning system, perhaps? I soon came across many more copies of this same setup, of a locked metal door leading to an incredibly tight space in front of which sat a handle. One of these had a scamp inside it. Had this one been naughty and received a temporary imprisonment as punishment from the conjurers, perhaps? Oh no. The realization of what I had likely just found hit me like a punch to the gut. I believe these mechanisms represent some kind of chemical warfare, gas chambers if you will, that the ancient Ayleid elves had likely been using on their human captives during their reign to murder them. Turning the handles correlating to each respective cell would release some form of poisonous gas that almost immediately executed its prisoner. Everything I had heard about these peoples was true. It was all true. The Ayleids were a disgusting, evil race that were entirely worthy of the descent we regularly throw towards them today. I don't even want to think about how many other rooms of this kind, ones that contain dozens of these barbaric killing machines, likely exist in other Ayleid ruins all over Tamriel. This one instance of discovery was enough for me, and I was done with my time inside these barbaric facilities. In reality, my last statement was both true and untrue. My time within this specific style of Ayleid ruins was indeed at an end, but there was also one more prominent Ayleid construction I wished to investigate as the conclusion of this journey. It only felt fitting, to be honest. The White Gold Tower itself. At least in this instance, I'd, presumably at least, be spared some of the horrors of the darker side of the Ayleid civilization. And you can never say no to a trip to the Imperial City after all. On this hopefully much less dangerous mission, I confidently strolled across the capital's western bridge and through the Talos Plaza district, my destination standing tall ahead of me all the while, like an omnipresent beacon. Before going into this, there was a question of how much of a White Gold Tower exactly I would actually be legally allowed to access. Truthfully, I'd only been to the Imperial City a few times before this in my life for business, and had never showed much interest in the structure until today. Once in the space surrounding the tower itself, I attempted to inquire with some of the local guards over if they had any information concerning its origins. Unfortunately, they remained stubbornly silent on the topic, meaning I was once again very much on my own here. Into the tower then, it seemed that at least this initial area, the Elder Council Chambers, as was its official title, catchy, was open to the public. Once inside, I can't say I exactly discovered much of note. But still, I had to delve deeper. Leading off from this initial hallway, I found a few doors presumably leading deeper into the structure, but, alas, they were locked shut tight, clearly off limits to the general public. Partially due to the negligence of this particular guard, though. This guy really should get his eyes and ears, for that matter, checked. I was too determined to give up here, to have this comparable disappointment be the end. It's time for some crime. Well, that isn't incredibly frustrating at all. Should this have deterred me from trying again? Probably. Were I to be caught, I doubt. I only wanted to inspect the architectural and archaeological differences between the construction of this building and the other Ayleid ruins in more detail, would exactly hold up as a cogent defense. But, as stated previously, I had come too far, and was too stubborn, to let some broken lockpicks conclude my investigation. No, I had to get more and try again. To do this, I had heard of a somewhat disreputable character who was known to hang around the northwest exterior of the city walls at certain times of day. Word on the street was that he offered a lucrative and not exactly legal item, for a price, of course, lockpicks. If I had any lingering doubts concerning the prudence of what I was doing, an inquiry with Shady Sam concerning rumours he had heard as of late seemed to immediately dispel them. What were the odds of this, truly? With Sam's assistance and a little bit of patience, let's see if the same goes for the White Gold Tower itself. What great treasures would we discover within its innermost chambers? Yeah, there isn't shit here. I guess the most noteworthy thing is that what we seem to be looking at here is the very foundation for the tower in its entirety, which is actually kind of insane if you think about it. You wouldn't think a core of this miniature size would be capable of supporting such an enormous structure atop it, so yet again, it just shows the Ayleids' prowess in how they built their structures. Bizarrely, I also found these chairs, I think? These were truly enigmatic. As is obvious, their proportions are far bigger than what would fit the frame of a regular human or even elf. While this could have led me to the conclusion that the Ayleids were much taller than your average man or mer alive today, I actually doubt this is the case. For one, the size doesn't match at all with the height of the various doors and passageways I came across in the 3 Ayleid ruins I explored prior to this, nor with the size of the human figure on the statue at Fanakesical. Moreover, if the skeletons we battled were indeed former Ayleids, the body proportions again don't fit whatsoever. The final nail in the coffin that tells me these are incredibly unlikely to have been used by actual Ayleids is simply the fact that they're present here at all. As of today, the Imperial Empire is hundreds of years old, and there's simply no way they'd have authentic Ayleid artifacts just randomly lying around in their place of origin like this. Surely they'd be locked away in storage much more securely somewhere else. I mean, to be fair, I did have to break my way into this room, so I guess it is possible that this chamber is being used for storage, but it still just doesn't really make sense. It's another mystery that I would argue exists independently of the many concerning the Ayleids we've debated over today, a whole separate topic of discussion. Let's get out of here and summarise our findings and theories, before cross-referencing them with what research says. First, a summary of my findings and thoughts. Despite their barbaric tendencies that will be laid bare for all to see in Seatar, what this investigation repeatedly hammered home was the sophistication of the Ayleid civilization. possibly using the water access made possible by the harbour that was Fanakesical, alongside many other similar sites I'm sure, they were able to spread not only their presence, but also their ideas far and wide across southern Tamriel, explaining the relative consistency in typological style among the majority of their ruins across colossal geographical distances. Their material culture was heavily based upon tree and root based imagery, possibly suggesting an origin for their people in a wooded environment. This could be the ancient, rainforest covered form Cyrodiil once took, or maybe they even originated from somewhere like Valenwood or Blackmarsh. They also displayed proficiency in both magical and mechanical technologies, the former seen through their use of arcane artifacts like magically charged wells and welkin stones, and the latter through their barbaric traps and kill machines. This final point represents the dark underbelly of their empire, a stain that would forever mar their name in history despite all the other successes they clearly enjoyed. Should their people, then, be forever abhorred, tossed to the side as if entirely absent of merit? Divisive as it may be to say, I'm not sure. These people were capable of great evil, seen through the suffering they inflicted on the Nedic peoples at the time, as the gas chambers discovered in Ser Tatar had confirmed without a shadow of a doubt, but you simply can't deny the refinement of many other facets of their civilization, of their eye for beautiful architecture, their respect for the natural world, and so on. It's all about seeing them through shades of grey, no matter how impossible that may initially seem. That's what this investigation ultimately taught me about the Ayleids. How much of it does scholastic consensus ultimately agree with? Well, the first thing I'm excited to explore through research is whether there is believed to be any truth to my theories concerning the Ayleids' affinity with, and perhaps origin from, some kind of natural or specifically densely forested environment. Research revealed that these people were, as is the case with Ulmer, believed to have originated not from Valenwood or Blackmarsh, but Somerset, leading me to believe the tree-inspired imagery probably stemmed from the jungle-type environment once common across Cyrodiil. Some also argue it could be a homage to the god of the forest, Ifri, although whether he was a key figure in the Ayleid pantheon specifically is unclear. They were more known to worship various Daedric princes and Aedra, rather than deities from the Bosmeri pantheon like Ifri. Something from my research that especially shocked me was the sheer extent of the Ayleids' malice independent of the gas chambers. I discovered the existence of something called flesh sculpting, wherein Ayleids would submit their Nedic subjects to horrific procedures that saw their skin mutilated and magically manipulated in macabre ways for their own sick amusement. Charming. And don't even get me started on gut gardens. I also discovered that the origin of many of their magical artifacts, such as the wells and welkin stones, were ethereal fragments that fell from the skies, from Ethereus itself, where all magic has its origin. The stones specifically were apparently pieces of meteoric glass that were cut into their signature shape. Makes sense. I thought I saw some evidence of napping on their surfaces, and they would often be used to store and transfer magical charges, as I had experienced directly myself. Fascinating stuff. What can be said about the Ayleid anatomy? Were the skeletons I fought truly their undead counterparts, or were they intimidatingly tall enough to sit upon the oversized chairs I discovered? In fact, the former seems more likely. Reportedly, they were around the average height of an elf, similar to the Altmer, so I've truly got no idea what those gargantuan seats were about. Unfortunately, research into some other topics relating to my finds didn't yield too many results. Things like whether or not they would have had ships, which would have explained Fanakesical's unique layout, or what exactly their ruins were made of that allowed them to withstand generations of erosion and corrosion due to their exposure to the elements. It is clear that, despite the extensive library of information that is known about the Ayleids, there is still much work to be done to uncover their mysterious past. I hope that my investigation today has helped, even just a little, in doing just that. Well, that was a very different sort of video from any I've made before. Nonetheless, I hope it was enjoyable, and please let me know in the comment section down below if you want more content in this sort of style. I also want to apologise if some of the discussion in the former segment of this video was inaccurate to the series' lore. I simply browsed the official Elder Scrolls lore wiki and other various sources for information regarding the Ayleids that was relevant to what I found during gameplay of Oblivion. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!